What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Steve.
I'm Lindsay.
Today we're going to be reacting to every country England has invaded visualized. This is probably one of the most requested topics for Lindsay specifically to check out. Now, I've checked this topic out probably, I think it was one of the first few topics I checked out when I started this channel.
That makes sense.
But it has definitely been a while. Yeah. As for Lindsay, she knows nothing about this. I'm sure since it's been a long time, I'll probably learn some new things with this video because obviously the first time you check something out, you definitely miss certain things that you usually see when you check out a video the second time. But mainly, Lindsay is about to be very shocked by this. She has no idea what's in store with the amount of countries England has invaded.
All right, well,
it is insane and something that you would never guess. Even understanding now that the British Empire was very large at one time.
Okay, don't give it away.
Yeah, this is going to be shocking. I'm really looking forward to this as well. But guys, enough rambling from us. Let's go ahead and jump in here and check out every country England has invaded visualized.
And I think, I don't know, you just keep saying it's going to be shocking, but I think the thing that will be most shocking about it is that England is such a small country, just like the inventions that we watched.
Yeah.
Like a small country and all the things that have come out of that one country.
Yeah, that really is like one of the most shocking things about it.
For a good chunk of the past few centuries, this music was the final boss music played for people across the entire world. The English and later the British have been responsible for invading and conquering more countries and people than any other nation in human history. It's startling just how many places they've been to. In this video, I'm going to do my best at attempting to visualize all of Britain's invasions and conquests for you, continent by continent, in as brief a time as possible. So let's begin with the closest continent to Britain, Europe. Ireland was the first target of British conquests and was invaded as early as 1169. Within 400 years of gradual conquests, the entire island was ruled by the British and remained that way until most of it was granted independence in 1921. Historically, France has probably been invaded by the English more times than any other country in the world. Just take a look at this huge list of invasions. There's none.
Okay, I didn't realize it was that many times.
Why that many?
Okay, I've heard that
there's like a feud between the English and the French. Yeah, I've heard that too.
Probably not as big a deal now, but I've definitely heard there's this feud, and this might explain some of it.
World.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, that's crazy. Wow.
Not even enough time to talk about a third of these. And for a time, all of this territory inside of modern France was directly controlled by the English, with Calais being the final piece that fell in 1557. Well, except for that time when the British took over Corsica for a couple years. The British continue to invade Spain by the millions every winter, but in the past, they've come with a lot less friendly intentions. English and later British soldiers invaded under the Black Prince in 1367 and continued on through the first, second, third, and fourth raids on Cadiz and that time when the British took over Gibraltar and Minorca. They gave Minorca back, but decided on keeping Gibraltar forever. In recent history, the British have invaded Belgium in order to support the Belgians, but that wasn't always the case. They conducted two pretty large-scale invasions of modern-day Belgium in 1654 and again in 1701. And Flanders itself was ruled by the English for a few years in the 14th century. The Netherlands was one of England's historical arch rivals, and so there's been plenty of invasions going in this direction across the 17th and 18th centuries.
Wow, I didn't realize that.
In 1940, the British technically invaded and took over Iceland peacefully for a year in order to prevent it from falling into the hands of the Germans. But this was heavily protested by the Icelandic government at the time, so in my books, it still counts as an invasion. Italy, of course, was invaded by the British Army during the Second World War as well in 1943. But there were plenty of invasions before then, dating back to Richard the Lionheart's invasion in 1190. Germany, too, was obviously invaded by the British Army in 1945, and northwestern Germany was occupied by the British for 3 years until 1948. But a lot of German territory was ruled by Britain long before then. The islands of Heligoland were British for most of the 19th century, and the Kingdom of Hanover was effectively ruled under a personal union for over a century between 1714 and 1837. Austria was also invaded in 1945, and the southwest of the country was occupied for a decade. Norway was invaded in 1810 and 1812 during the Napoleonic Wars when it was a part of Denmark-Norway because Denmark was aligned to France, so obviously Denmark was invaded during that time as well. Finland, Estonia, and Latvia were all briefly invaded by small units during the Crimean War against Russia because they were all part of the Russian Empire at the time, and of course, Russia itself was invaded then too, as well as in 1918 when the British took over a large chunk of northern Russia for a time in a fight against the Bolsheviks. The territory of modern Ukraine was invaded by British army units during the Crimean War.
Okay, I just want to say that, yeah, I'm learning a lot again because like
we're only 3.5 minutes.
I did not remember like this many places just in Europe.
Yeah,
this is insane.
It really is.
Even Russia, I didn't even know that. The Netherlands, what? I mean, the Netherlands makes a little more sense to me because they're close, and obviously France and around there I knew.
The British took over the Croatian island of Vis between 1807 and 1814 during their fight against Napoleon. The British Army had boots and guns on the ground in Bosnia recently between 1992 and 95, fighting against the Bosnian Serbs, and around the same time, the RAF also carried out bombing strikes against Serbian Serb targets in Serbia in 1999. Montenegro was briefly and invaded in 1913 during the First Balkan War. The British owned the westernmost Ionian islands of Greece between 1815 and 1863 before they gave them back, while Bulgaria was invaded and almost entirely occupied by the British Army between 1918 and 1919 at the end of World War I. Cyprus was a British protectorate between 1878 and 1914 when they decided to just outright annex it to piss off the Turks, and it remained annexed until 1960, except for two small chunks that are still British today. Turkey itself was massively invaded by the British during World War I, and part of it was occupied between 1919 and 1923. That wraps up Europe, so let's move on to Asia next. Modern-day Israel and Palestine, as well as Jordan, were British-controlled from the end of World War I to 1948 and 1946, respectively. Lebanon and Syria were both occupied from the Vichy French government.
All right, guys, so I know that the state of Israel, I believe it was 1948, if I'm not mistaken, was when Israel became a nation officially, right, on the books. And from what I understand, the British had something big to do with it. I'm not exactly sure what they did. Let us know in the comments. It's almost like the British basically are the biggest reason why Israel is an independent nation today.
Also, just a little observation. Okay, it's really confusing to try and learn American history growing up, like in school, for me, because I don't really love history and keeping all the dates straight. Can you imagine learning British history at length in school in the UK?
Well, I'm guessing there are very few people watching this that could literally name
but I'm just
even a half of the places that has been invaded.
There's way more to it, so...
Yeah, way more to it. Way deeper, way longer. Yeah, it's crazy.
Briefly, during World War II, Iraq was ruled between 1919 and 1932.
That's an interesting spelling.
And invaded again during the Second World War, and again in 1991.
Is that the actual spelling?
In 2003, Kuwait was a colony for over 60 years until 1966. Georgia and Azerbaijan were both invaded and occupied right at the end of World War I for a year. Iran has been invaded at least 3 times, with the most notable example being the joint Anglo-Soviet invasion in 1941. Turkmenistan was invaded in 1918 to prevent Bolshevik influence from spreading any further.
That's a pretty large country.
Is a favorite British invasion spot since it's been invaded in 1839, 1878, 1919, and again in 2001.
Okay, in 2001 and 2014, that was the recent war, obviously, I'm guessing. So it's interesting. I wonder what the very definition would be of invaded in how he's describing it. It sounds like it's just...
Well, and occupied, too.
Right.
What's the difference?
Right. There are differences there, obviously. You can see the different colorations here.
Occupied must be like when you're there for a certain length of time, like you take up residence, maybe? Like make a base or something?
Yeah, and invaded sounds like we're coming in and we're, war or something.
Right.
Bahrain, the United Arab Emirates, and Oman were all controlled by the British until the early 1970s,
Qatar.
while a
Until the
Yemen was
70s?
controlled for over a century between 1839 and 1967.
Wow.
India, Pakistan, Bangladesh,
Holy-
and Sri Lanka were
Wow.
all, of course, invaded
Obviously,
many times
India
and outright
knew about
ruled
that.
by the British Empire in parts for nearly
Although I don't really know the details about it. I know that the British obviously invaded India. I know that India is a Commonwealth nation. I don't really understand the ins and outs of it. It's something I think we need to look into. I think that's going to be a very interesting part of British history.
Yeah.
nearly 2 centuries between 1757 and 1947. Nepal was invaded in 1814 but never successfully conquered. Bhutan was invaded in 1772 and again in 1864 and was sort of conquered as a protectorate between 1910 and 1948. Burma/Myanmar was invaded in 1826 and was definitely successfully conquered and ruled through 1947. Thailand was briefly invaded in 1945 since they were allied to Japan in World War II, and so was Vietnam in the same year, but that was to support the French government against the growing independence movement. Malaysia and Singapore were each conquered and ruled up until the 1950s and 1960s. Brunei was conquered and ruled up until the 1980s.
Okay, I'm now seeing occupied, invaded, and conquered and ruled are 3 different things here.
That's 4.
No, conquered and ruled I'm putting together.
Oh, okay.
And then you got invaded and what's the other one?
Ruled?
No, occupied.
Occupied.
Yeah.
Whereas the Philippines were briefly invaded during the Seven Years' War. China got invaded a lot, and Hong Kong was a colony until as recently as 1997. And while not outright invaded, part of Japan was occupied following World War II.
Okay, isn't there something about Hong Kong even right now that like China was supposed to like kind of
Give them their independence.
give them the independence or something? That was like an agreement that the British made when they relinquished control or something like that of Hong Kong, and Hong Kong was supposed to have it was something like 50 years. Something wasn't supposed to happen for 50 years or something. I don't really know the ins and outs of it. I just know something on the surface about that. Let us know in the comments, guys. That might be something interesting to check out too.
Between 1946 and 1952. And finally, Indonesia was invaded a bunch during the Napoleonic Wars since it was a Dutch colony aligned to France at the time. Next up, Oceania. Australia and New Zealand, of course, were invaded by the British and established as colonies that each gained independence in 1931. Papua New Guinea was also a British colony for a time, as were the island countries of Fiji, Kiribati, the Solomon Islands, Tuvalu, and Vanuatu. Let's move back over to Africa next, which the British have violently visited a lot.
Wow.
In terms of just places the British outright colonized after invasions, there's the Gambia, Sierra Leone, Ghana, Nigeria, Egypt, Sudan, South Sudan, Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, Zambia, Malawi, Zimbabwe, Botswana, Namibia, and South Africa, along with parts of modern-day Somalia and Guinea. Senegal was briefly invaded and had some of their coastline taken over in the 1700s, while during the Second World War, the British invaded the French colonies of Djibouti, Madagascar, and Comoros after they aligned themselves with the Nazi Vichy regime, and the Italian colonies of Libya, Eritrea, and Ethiopia, although they had also invaded Ethiopia much earlier in 1868. And as German colonies right before World War I, the British also invaded Togo and Cameroon without annexing them afterwards. For the final area of the world left to discuss, let's move over to the Americas. All of Canada was a British colony until 1931, while Newfoundland remained until 1931. The United States, of course, was a colony until 1776, and was invaded again in 1812, and the modern states of Oregon and Washington were claimed right up until 1846. As far as other outright British colonies here go, there was the Bahamas, Jamaica, Belize, Grenada, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Barbados, St. Lucia, Dominica, Antigua and Barbuda, St. Kitts and Nevis, Trinidad and Tobago, and Guyana. Besides colonies, Cuba was invaded and occupied during the 7 Years' War in 1762.
Goodness!
Was invaded in 1793 during the French Revolutionary Wars. The Dominican Republic was invaded way back in 1655 in an attempt at conquest under Oliver Cromwell. Parts of the east coast of Honduras and Nicaragua were conquered and ruled for nearly 2 centuries until 1819. They sent the Navy to invade Mexico in 1861 to force them to repay some debts, and during the splendidly named War of Jenkins' Year, aka the more lame-sounding War of the Austrian Succession, the British invaded a lot of Spain's colonies, including Panama, a huge one into Colombia, and ultimately Peru. In 1796,
Is there going to be anything
Brittany
left.
because it was a Dutch
Damn
colony,
it.
and they were allied with the revolutionary French and later Napoleon. They also invaded Martinique and Guadeloupe
That's
because
crazy.
they actually were French during the Napoleonic Wars. Venezuela was invaded in 1902 as part of the so-called Venezuela.
All right, give me a second. This is insane.
I'm just like honestly at a loss for words. Are there going to be any countries left that they haven't?
I mean, obviously.
it
obviously,
doesn't
but
seem like
I
it.
know, like, the vast majority of the countries around the world, it pretty much seems like. It's just
Man,
incredible.
y'all are busy.
We're busy.
We're busy. Yeah.
Yeah, this is, yeah. This is blowing my mind, because when I looked into this topic, I was brand new to Britain, like knowing anything about
True.
it.
So you have a little more context.
Yeah, like I didn't have any context around pretty much anything about the UK or Britain in general. And since then, I've learned a lot. And so, this is blowing my mind maybe even more today. And I think
you can understand it a little.
yeah, it's just I have more context surrounding Britain in general, so it's just wow, knowing the size of Britain,
I mean, no matter what you think of conquest and war and all that, aside, it's still a very impressive feat.
No doubt, it's extremely impressive. Yes.
Wow.
How could you not say it's impressive? I mean, obviously, conquest in modern society would be a big no-no. Obviously, we all agree on that. But like when you look at this small island nation, when you really realize how small controlled this much territory at one point, I mean, like that's insane.
It really is.
It's like incredible.
Venezuela crisis to force the country to repay some debts they had defaulted on, kind of like Mexico, while Argentina and Uruguay were both invaded during the Napoleonic Wars as well in 1806 when Spain and her colonies were still allied with Napoleon. And that pretty much sums up all of the territory the British have ever ruled and all of the countries this small island has ever invaded. There are a total of 65 countries today who celebrate their independence days from the British Empire. The empire used to rule over a quarter of all the world's land at the same time and was the biggest empire in human history. And in total, today, there have been 117 modern countries that have been aggressively invaded by the British armed forces during some point in their histories, representing a total of 60% of all the world's nations, which is almost the same number of countries that you can watch this video.
Okay, you were right. I'm shocked.
Yeah. 60% of the world, basically.
Wow.
What do you say, 117 countries? 62 got their independence?
62 or 65.
Celebrates their independence from Britain?
Wow.
That is incredible, guys. Like I was saying, while I've looked into this before, Lindsay hasn't, so obviously she's extremely shocked by this. But even I'm shocked at seeing this again because, like, when I started learning about the UK, when I saw this, I knew next to nothing, right? And so since then, I've learned the relative size of the country.
Right.
I've learned
so you can appreciate how big of a feat it is.
Yeah. So you shocked?
Yeah, that's an understatement, I think.
It really is amazing when you think of how much land was invaded by this island right here.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really incredible when you think about it.
To be honest, like, how do you even have that much manpower to take on someplace like China or Russia?
Well, the British Navy was the most powerful, largest navy in the world for a very long time. I don't know how many centuries. Let me know in the comments, guys. But that's something I'd like to look into. But they had the most powerful navy forever. And so it makes sense how you have the most powerful navy. You're one of the few countries that can actually go here and around here and everywhere and invade these. No one else could do that.
Yeah.
At that point.
But I'm saying, like, once you're on the ground, like, the numbers.
Yeah, I know that.
Population-wise, like, it just seems.
Well, I'm guessing if you're talking about going back far enough, they had not only did they have the biggest navy, but they also probably had greater weaponry than the locals or wherever they were going to. At least if you go back far enough. Think about when you go back to the 1400s or the 1500s.
More advanced.
Right. I'm guessing that was part of it. And, I don't know. That's interesting, like, how they actually made that happen.
You know what this makes me want to do now?
What?
Go watch more adverts for the
yeah.
Royal Navy.
Yeah. I enjoyed that.
Those were good.
Yeah, those were really fun. We'll probably do that sometime soon.
Yeah.
Do something maybe like, I don't know. I don't know if we should do Army or do Navy.
We've gotten a lot of suggestions for certain ones to do, so.
Yeah. Anyways, guys, thank you so much for stopping by. Please click that like button. Feel free to drop your comments or suggestions about this video or others. And don't forget to subscribe to continue to follow us on our journey to discover anything and everything about the UK and Ireland. Until next time, guys. Peace.